Morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning and welcome to this Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Alex Hall, Vice Chairman of this committee, and will be your chairman for this meeting. Can I remind you that the audio visual feed of this formal public meeting is being recorded and will be accessible via the County Council's website following today's meeting. I would like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we will need to leave the chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We then need to wait in the car park until further instructions. Can I remind everyone to ensure that their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent? If you wish to ask a question during the course of the meeting, you can please raise your hand. Can I also remind members of the committee to switch on their microphones when invited to speak close to the microphone, and to switch their microphone off after making their contributions. I would also like to welcome officers presenting today who are participating live via Microsoft Teams. Can I ask that you introduce yourselves at the beginning of your item or when you make a contribution to ask questions or contribute during the meeting, please raise your hand virtually or type speak in the chat function. Requests to speak will be collated by Chiara. We will now move on to the formal agenda. Apologies for absence, please, Robert.
Apologies received from Councillor Adams, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Do any members wish to declare any interest? No. So item 3, this item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. Please turn to pages 5 to 12 of the agenda pack. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Dyer. And a seconder? Councillor Strangle. We will now come to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? Any abstentions? Councillor Austin. Oh yeah, and I abstain as well. Thank you. Those minutes are agreed as a correct and accurate record. Item 4, announcements by the chairman, executive councillors and lead officers. As chairman, we have a shorter than usual agenda this morning with one pre-decision item. I would like to ask officers presenting to only summarise the key points of their reports and what is required by the committee and in regard to members of this committee, to stress the importance of concise questions and contributions. Are there any announcements from the executive councillors? Richard Davis, Councillor Davis, or Councillor Perrotton Williams? No. Are there any officer announcements from Councillor?
Yes, yes, Chairman. Just to advise the councillors that the local transport plan, the public consultation has started today and that it closes on the 1st of December. So that's just a notice I wish to share.
Okay, thank you. I have just seen that Councillor Perrotton Williams is with us. I wasn't sure. Is there anything to report? No. Right, so we move on to item 5. This is a pre-decision item which invites the committee to consider a paper seeking approval to enter into a contract for the purpose of delivering the Red Line Square Stamford paving project, which is the subject of a decision by the leader of the council, executive councillor for resources, communications and commissioning, and the executive councillor for highways, transport and IT. The decision is being taken between the 2nd to the 11th of November 2021. The report was published as a supplementary item on the 18th of October following the publication of the agenda. The report will be presented by Sam Edwards, Head of Highways Infrastructure, who is remotely present via Teams. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Chairman, and morning all. Before I start, I just want to apologise. I'm a little under the weather today, so if I lose my voice, I'll try and cough and bring it back. So yes, Red Line Square, to summarise then, this is a scheme that was originally completed in 2007, along with a number of other improvement schemes in Stamford. This particular area had a sort of paving sets installed as part of the scheme. Unfortunately, at that time, there was a funding constraint, so it was a known constraint that we were putting in thinner sets than what was desired, and putting sand bed and joints in as well. As a result, as we can see, sort of 13, 14 years later, we have now seen a level of degradation to those areas. The vehicle movements have increased, and the sets have started to rock, move, and cause damage. And it now poses safety concerns, and also the maintenance involved in ensuring that the road is safe is starting to sort of chase its tail. It's becoming more and more expensive to maintain each year. So following requests from local members and from the executive council, we looked into what options we could do with that with the particular area to bring it back to the way it was intended in 2007. So we produced a number of options, which is within this report. The first option was to effectively, so option one, effectively put back as it is now, but replace the damaged sets, redo the foundation and the sand and mortar beds. That was rejected based on the fact that we're just maintaining the same thing and we'll have similar problems in years to come. Option two was a similar option, but using a mortar bed and joints. I'll come back to why that was rejected, but broadly it was on the same principle that actually, yes, with the mortar joints and bed, it would improve the longevity, but still cause significant issues from a maintenance perspective. Option three was to actually remove the sets entirely and go through with a more traditional bituminous surfacing. Option four was the same as option three, but to maintain sets across where the pedestrian crossings are to delineate those. And option five was effectively to go back and do what would have been desired in the first place if the finances had been there at that time. So that's a thicker set, a new deeper foundation, mortar beds, and mortar joints. Essentially, it was narrowed down to between option three and five, which is very much a trade-off between aesthetic abilities and cost. And due to the input from Heritage England, and the need to actually maintain the aesthetic culture in the market town of Stamford, it was decided to go with option five, and that was also discussed at the Stamford Transport Board as well. So the scheme will largely entail, or the intended scheme will largely entail, removing the existing sets and storing those for reuse in other places across the county, purchasing deeper sets that are 150mm thick rather than 100, taking out the existing foundation, a type 1 sort of hardcore foundation, replacing it with bituminous foundation, so a much stronger bed, and then laying these thicker sets on a mortar bed and joints. So this intended scheme will reduce the maintenance liability for the council, and it will also maintain the aesthetics. And that's probably one thing to stress as well on the aesthetics. The materials used at the time was a product called Cromwell stone. That's no longer in use. So the material called Scoutmore is now used. It is pretty much exactly the same. To the untrained eye, it would look exactly the same. And the important thing to stress there is that we will be speaking to Heritage England to get that approval, but informally we've already had that sort of open discussion. And this we are only as part of the scheme changing the carriageway. The actual footways will stay as they are. which will limit the impact to pedestrian use, shop accesses, or problems in relation to that while we do the construction. Finances wise, from that principle, as per the report, the scheme is expected to cost just short of 1.5 million. I should stress at this stage, we do have £435,000 of risk in that. That is a high risk value. We are expecting that to come down, but because we're quite early on in the scheme that we're looking to deliver next summer, it's appropriate to have that level of risk until we either design it out or it comes to fruition. But we do expect those costs to come down, but it would be too early to be stating that. With regards to the actual procurement, we are looking to get obviously seek approval following this from a key decision to enter into formal contract with Eurovia, who are a contractor we've done lots of public realm schemes of this nature with, who do a good job. We've already in ECI discussions with them already, talking about material availability, talking about traffic management, how we actually build it, how we program it, how we keep the shops and the pedestrians open while we do it without any impact, which is going well. So if this is approved by the key decision, we will enter into that contract with a view to starting in the sort of late spring, early summer next year. I think that summarises the paper. Happy to go into any more details, and I'd welcome any questions.
Thank you for that, Sam. I would now like to invite members of the committee to ask clarifying questions. Chiara, do we have any speakers? Okay, yeah, Councillor Brooks, please.
Thank you, Chairman. The risk figure there, £435,000, seems a high number, and I just wondered if you could possibly enlarge on that or expand on that, giving an explanation as to what sort of thing that is included for, please.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So there's a quality of risk assessment that comes out with that value. The main or the key elements that's included in that at the moment is the potential for utility diversions. We currently have C3 quotations, which is a process with the utility companies. From the informal discussions we've had, we're not expecting to need to do any utility diversions, but we haven't had that confirmed yet. We're hoping to have that confirmed in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Once that is confirmed and any potential utility diversion isn't required, that figure would drop significantly, which is why I'm saying I think that those costs will go down, because we're not actually taking the construction any lower than it was before. But we need to make sure that the utility standards of what they expect cover over their utility hasn't changed in the intervening period. So that's why that risk is still there. Other elements as part of that risk is sort of more standardized things, weather as an example. And actually the two key risks in there is material price increases, which is what we're trying to mitigate now by entering into contract with Eurovia and placing orders early. So we fix those costs at a point in time with the sort of the national problem that we have on that. And the other element is sort of availability of contractors and professional staff. There is a big draw that we're finding over to projects such as HS2 and other schemes on the west of the country. And again, we want to sign contracts to move into contract with the contractor so that we fix those staff and have them assigned to it. So those risks at the moment are there. But again, if we proceed with the scheme and we enter into contract earlier than we would normally, then it mitigates those, and I would expect the risk to drop significantly.
Okay, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, the first question is really, is there a health and safety risk at the minute on the site? I only ask this to see where the balance is drawn between what seems to be improving the appearance of the square against health and safety issues in other areas. I raise this for an example. There's a zebra crossing in my area that needs upgrading hits the criteria, but it's in doubt because of funding. However, £1.5 million can be found for this exercise, and one could argue that turning the street lights off at night is paying for it. Anyway, putting that to one side, the 260,000 in the pay for graph, what's that exactly for? And is there any guarantee that it's going to be completed on time, the price will be stated, and a guarantee of the workmanship? Well, that's basically, it. Is there any guarantee on those 3 points? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll start from the first question. Sort of why we're doing it, I suppose, as an offset is without regular maintenance, there will be a significant safety concern at this site. We have had isolations where the actual sets have pulled out, and you've got big holes, and that's also at crossing places for pedestrians. Now we've reactively responded to that and put measures in place to put them back, but that is becoming more and more. Well, it's happening with greater frequency, and as the sets, the way they link together, as more of that happens, it's going to happen in greater amounts as well. So I can't say that there's a safety issue, because we respond to it to make sure that the people of the county are safe. But without that regular maintenance, it would present a significant safety concern, and as part of excuse me, and as part of the aesthetics, what we're intending is to maintain what's there existing. Moving on to the second point, which I think was about, you mentioned 260,000, which is in relation to the fees. So that includes the design fees, the project management fees, and the supervision fees. And there were some sort of small fees in relation to speaking with planners and some legal advice as well. So that will be, so within the county, or this element of it, we operate within a trading account. So there is actual design consultancy professional fees in relation to designing and supervising to, in many ways, ensure the quality and the workmanship which came onto the sort of the latter point that we're trying to achieve. Without that supervision, we are leaving it to the hands of others, and it's important to make sure we have the testing regime in there to get a product that Lincolnshire is happy with it. With regards the final point about certainty of time, I can never, unfortunately, give certainty. Anything could happen on site. We could have flooding, we could have a utility damage, we could have a lack of materials, a lack of delivery. Unfortunately, there's nothing certain with any kind of construction project. But what we do think is, as we develop the scheme and get to the point where we are putting sort of greater defined times in there, the program, the contract program will reflect that, and we'll have scrutinized it. And there will be an element of float within that program. But unfortunately, no construction program can ever categorically confirm it will definitely meet to that, because there are things that happen outside of the control of the delivery team that impact on it. And as far as cost, again, we have put in robust costs or estimates into this, and obviously, as you can see, there's a significant risk sum in that to ensure that we meet or fall under the budget. But just like the program, there is a direct correlation between the two, and if something did happen on site that affected the program significantly, it could, I wouldn't say it would, but it could also have an impact on the cost. But again, we will address that with clarity and inform sort of the executive portfolio as that's happening, if it does happen.
Councillor Dyer.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And thank you, Sam, for presenting the report. I think Sandford, it's a beautiful town, and it's great to see that there's this investment being spent in the town, because it's much needed. I last drove through Stamford a few months ago, and the cobbles are definitely in a state at the moment. So it's great to see this item coming forward. Just out of curiosity, if this scheme goes well, will it potentially lead on to other similar schemes across the county where there are cobbled streets, perhaps not as bad as Stamford, but where potentially in a few years there may be an issue? I think, for instance, of the Bailgate. So potentially, could this this be carried forward to other areas going forward. Just a few questions in relation to the aesthetics. I know, if I remember rightly, the stones on the footpaths in Stamford and the highway at the moment, they are a different stone, but will these still match? And it basically just ask for your reassurance that it won't look odd, given that the pavement is going to remain the same. And am I right in assuming that the market is currently held on or near these cobbles? Will these works impact the market in Stamford at all? And finally, in terms of the waste cobbles, what's being done with those? I can't see anything in the report, but obviously there was an option put forward to committee within the report to actually relay these cobbles. So potentially there's still a use for them. What happens to those once we're done with those? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. The first one is difficult for me to answer about, could this be used elsewhere across the county? Of course, we could look at, as officers, we could look at any scheme anywhere, but we would need the direction from our members. But you know, to say that we have the resources to look at, to program these sort of schemes elsewhere? Yes. As far as do they match? We've met with the supplier. We've also done similar schemes elsewhere, and they are very, very similar in look, texture, and size as the existing. And actually, we've spoken with Heritage England or in the process, and they've also confirmed very similar things. And we have to go through that approval process. So we're quite aligned to the fact that they will be aesthetically sympathetic towards each other, the existing and the future. Sort of the markets in Stamford. As part of the consultation, we've already met with the local members, and we are now in the process about now of talking to, for example, the Civic Society and various others organisations in Stamford that would include and making sure that we aren't impacting things like the market, or if we are and we have to, it's only because we have to, and we actually, we try and sympathise with each other and mainly communicate about what we're doing and when the markets are. And that's similar for business owners and those that are adjacent next to it, is keeping those businesses open throughout the works. And largely, those are the reasons why we wanted to enter into early contractual involvement with Eurovia, to talk about these things with them, rather than get right to the end, issue the works and say, well, we can't do it in that way. We should have designed it in a different way. So it's designing in those principles early on. Finally, the cobbles. The intention is that those cobbles will go to I can't remember exactly which, but to one of the highway depots, and they can be used elsewhere across the county for maintenance regimes. We've got similar cobbles or sets across the rest of the county, and where those are damaged, sometimes we replace them with bituminous material because the sets don't exist. These will now allow us to be used where appropriate, where it's matching for future use.
Are there any other questions? No. So thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion for this item. The actions, in terms of the actions, the committee is invited to consider the report presented and to determine whether we support the recommendations. 1, to the Executive Councillor, A, that he approves the Council progressing with the Red Lion Square Stamford project in accordance with the recommended option 5 described in paragraph 1.2.1 of the report. B, approves in principle the award and entering into a contract for the construction of the scheme. And C, delegates to the Executive Director, place in consultation with the Executive Councillor for Highways, Transport and IT, authority to take all decisions necessary as per page 7 of the report. And 2, to the leader of the council, that he approves the scheme appraisal for the scheme as per page 8 of the report. And 3, finally, to agree that additional comments made by members during today's discussion to be passed on to the leader of the council and to the Executive Councillor ahead of consideration for this item. I propose that I move that the committee supports option 5 and the proposed recommendations of this report, and agrees to pass on our comments to the leader of the council and to the Executive Councillor. Is there a seconder? Okay, thank you. We will now vote. You are voting on whether you support the proposal. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? Yeah, that's great. Thank you. that is agreed. Okay. So now we move on to the annual update on Lincolnshire County Council's approach to transport strategy developments. This item is on pages 13 to 18 of the agenda pack and considers details about what a transport strategy is and what the purpose and benefits of them are for Lincolnshire County Council. The report will be presented by Sam Edwards, Head of Highways Infrastructure, who is remotely present via Teams. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Chairman. Me again, all. So yeah, this is a report that I produce on an annual basis. It's very much just an update report, and I tend to just put in a little bit, particularly because I know we've got a new scrutiny committee since the last time, or new members on it, about what the transport strategy is and what we do that feeds into it. So several years ago, we sort of reflected on what we have as a county, and this was very much so. What we have as a county is what our plans are for the future for capital investment, and we had a excuse me, we had a number of strategies about big scale investment, about sort of key routes, things like the major routes that run through the county, like the A15, 16, 17, A52, A158, and so forth. And we had aspirations or sort of sporadic aspirations of what we wanted in the 8 key urban areas. And we had some transport strategies in some and some not in others. So the proposal that was put forward was to actually provide transparency across all of that and consistency about what is the desires for each of the 8 urban areas. So we sort of we've used this transport strategy, which is a nationally accepted process used by many other authorities and one that the DfT acknowledge and many other third-party funders, which is an important point which I'll come on to actually define that. So we looked at a program. It's not realistic to do all the traffic models in 1 year and then all the those transport strategies in the next year. So we phased it, which is on the plan in the paper. And just to explain what they are. So there's a local need and a national need for the strategy. So they will, going through the process, we'll do a traffic model first. That takes almost a year actually to and a fair bit of investment to understand how the transport network works within that particular urban area. So that will take traffic data, we use mobile phone data, it will take origin and destination surveys, and it will then get scrutinised upon completion by central government via the DfT. And just for information, that needs to achieve in excess of a 96% correlation with the actual comings and goings on the ground. Now that traffic model will look at today, but it will also factor in background growth, targeted growth. For example, if there's a sustainable urban extension or a particular large investment in an area linked to the local plan. It will also factor in, for example, where people live, where the shops are, where the schools are, because that has a big impact on the travelling logistics. Taking that traffic model, that gives us sort of the today, but it also gives us the tomorrow without any level of intervention. So what's going to happen to the network if we don't do anything? But also it means that we can model elements of what happens if we do. What happens if we take this junction and make it larger? What happens if we shut this road? What happens if we create a new road? And it can provide modelling of what happens on opening year, or 10 years from now, or 20 years from now. And obviously that model will need to be updated as it goes along. But the intention of the model is sort of, well, that's great, we've got a model, but what is it that we want to do with it? And that's where the transport strategy comes in. So we take the model, we take sort of the analytical data that comes out of it and say, you know, these are the sort of themes that we should be targeting around congestion busting schemes or active travel schemes, safety projects, sustainable transport. There's a myriad of different projects and initiatives that come out of it. But in addition to that, we also go out with a consultation process to stakeholders and to drop-in sessions, and we've recently just completed that for the ones we're doing for Grantham, Sleaford and the Skegness sort of coastal area for this year now. Once that's completed, we will then take that information and define a long list of projects that could be developed or potentially developed for the future. And usually out of that, there's a short list or a narrow list of schemes based on certain attributes of what we're trying to say we're trying to achieve, whether that's a congestion busting sort of scheme or a safety scheme, etc. That then gets drafted into the strategy document and sets our sort of the county's aspiration. But the one thing I'm always very clear on, it is an aspiration. It's not a delivery plan. We all have to acknowledge that there is never going to be enough money to deliver everything within that strategy, which is stressed all the way through the process. But unless we have, you know, an idea of what we want to achieve, then it's very difficult to achieve anything. So I mean, and the other wider benefits of that is that if we get developments that come through, they can actually align with what our strategy is rather than sort of haphazard, maybe not, or aligning with it or conflicting in the future. Also, without having a strategy document, some kind of governed process about what we want to do in a certain area, if we put in third-party funding bid opportunities to people like the Department for Transport or MHCLG or Homes England or whoever, they want to see evidence as to why this is a priority for the county rather than, you know, Sam said he thinks it needs doing. It's not enough. We need actually an evidence base, which is where the traffic model comes in as well. That is almost an expectation that you really won't get any significant funding without that sort of evidence base that supports it. So that's sort of the need, and I've gone through quite quickly, sort of summarised it, but there's a fair bit more in the paper, and I believe that many people that will be sort of involved in these or have sat on boards for a particular area, because in each area of the 8 urban areas, we have a transport board, which is chaired by either Councillor Richard Davies or Councillor Perrotton Williams, and they have local members and a selection of officers from both county and district to provide input and to review any transport strategy that's there. So progress update, in the last period we have or just about to complete the Gainsborough transport strategy. That's been slightly delayed in completing because of some of the sort of personnel changes there, but that's due to be completed this financial year. We've also excuse me, also completed the Grantham traffic model last financial year, the Sleaford traffic model, and the Skegness sort of general coastal area traffic model, which comes on to what I was just saying with this financial year. We've been working on the Grantham, Sleaford and Skegness coastal area transport strategy, which are going to plan. They're due to be complete, or the first draft towards the start of next calendar year, but obviously they have to go through an iteration process and then a review process. So it's likely to be early next financial year before they're sort of adopted or endorsed. And I've just included sort of in the paper, I think on the packet, it's page 17. There's a table of what we've done, with the top table being traffic models and the bottom table being transport strategies, of what we've done to date and what we intend to do looking forward. So I think that sort of concludes a summary of the annual update on what we've done, and I'd welcome any comments at that point.
Councillor Strangle.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Sam, for your report. Very comprehensive. It mentions in one of your paragraphs, 1.6, prioritising walking and cycling. My question is the lack of joined up when we put in cycleways. I'll give you an example. The county did a marvellous job on Tritton Road, which has got an excellent cycleway in. It's the joined up bit. When it runs out, where do you go from there? A lot of people would like to cycle, but they're very nervous about actually cycling on the road. Another example I could give you is Skellingthorpe Road, neighbouring my patch. They have to cycle on a very narrow pedestrian bit, and of course it impacts on people walking there. I know it's difficult, especially in urban areas where you can't really move roads very easily. The other bit I'd like to mention is that there's a lovely cycleway all the way down the western side of the bypass from Skellingthorpe Road roundabout down in towards Carhome roundabout. The problem is you can't cross over from Birchwood because you're crossing over a very busy highway. Now, I would imagine the only way you could mitigate that would be to put in an underpass. But what my real concern, my question is, how do you try and join up cycleways so they have not an end, they can move into other areas? I spent many years with the forces in Germany, and when they constructed anything, they did it so that it all joined up. Now, I appreciate it's going to take money, but I'd like to know what you can do about helping cyclists. And I agree with the principle of cycling. No way will I do it, probably fall off. But the thing is, I think it's a good thing to actually move forward. So it's all about the joining up is my question. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I'll take that in the reverse order, I think is the best way. So the one particular sort of specific about the, I know the footpath you're on about and crossing the bypass around sort of between Carhome and Skellingthorpe Road roundabout, the complexity we have, and I know I've repeated this a few times before, so I apologise, but that section of the bypass is not actually managed or maintained by Lincolnshire County Council. It's a trunk road network managed by the National Highways as they are now. So yes, there has been a number of discussions and lobbying about, for example, putting in possibly an underpass or grade separated footbridge over Skellingthorpe Road at the actual roundabout. But so far those discussions haven't led to any funding or development from National Highways, but we continue to work collaboratively with them. With regards sort of about walking, cycling, totally agree. And I think it's important to stress that I probably didn't stress in the report is that there are a number of other walking and cycling strategies taking place. Again, those are aligning with the transport strategies. They're not being done in isolation. The actual project teams are working they're even at the same engagement events to make sure we're not asking the same questions of the public. And that we're using each of the stakeholder engagement and drop-in sessions for data for each other's study, but they are linked. So the strategy is not going to come out and say, get rid of all footpaths, while the cycling walk is saying, put footpaths. They're saying the same message. So I think that's quite important. As far as making connections, you're absolutely right. Is that they need to connect to make a full network. It's not about looking at it in isolation. And that is what those walking and cycling network plans devise. But again, it needs to secure the funding that I think you mentioned. It's about securing funding to achieve those things and what we can do across those networks. But I think the important thing is to, at the very least, have a plan of what we want, and to hopefully unlock third-party funding to make that achievable.
Councillor Dyer.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, Sam, thanks for this report, and I think it's really important that we, promote modal shift wherever we can. And I know, obviously, we've met, haven't we, to discuss the Highcombe Relief Road in my division, and it's great to know that actually walking and cycling infrastructure is playing a part in that development. I can imagine 20 or so years ago it was just an afterthought, but it's great that that's part of the process from day one. Just two questions though. On page whatever it is in the plan, you detail all of the various plans that are in progress or have been completed. How much of Lincolnshire isn't covered by one of these plans? Because obviously there's a lot of rural communities out there that have got their own problems. So I'd be just curious, what black spots have we got around Lincolnshire? And secondly, and perhaps it relates to that question, how does the local transport plan that currently went out for consultation last week impact this? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I'll take those in reverse again because I think that's the better way it comes across. So the local transport plan, or LTP5, that is basically the umbrella document that sits across. There's a number of documents that sit underneath that, of which one of them will be the transport strategies. So it's important that they align, that there's a thread running through all of that, and we've been working very closely with the officer Jason Copper in doing that. So to answer the question, they align very, very closely. So one's not going to say one thing and the other says the other. I mean, I don't think I'm going out of turn to say that there is a very big shift in the last few years towards sustainable travel, and that they will both acknowledge that quite strongly. With regards to, sorry, one moment. Apologise, sorry about that. With regards the other comment about these, in fact, I've lost my thread. What was the other point, Councillor Dyer?
Thanks, Sam. It's just how parts of Lincolnshire that aren't covered by any of these plans.
Thank you.
On page 17, it lays out where they're being covered.
Yeah, apologise. Yeah, so the 8 urban areas, I must stress, they are more than just the city or the town. We do actually pick up neighbouring villages and areas, and it's more about making those connectivities. Obviously, there is going to be a limit of what can be produced or sort of captured within those areas. But in addition to that, we have other studies such as the RAP, so the Route Action Plan. So that picks up similar sort of studies, but with a different sort of approach to it on the key the key regional and local networks. So, for example, the Route Action Plan investigates things like congestion schemes, safety schemes, active travel schemes along the routes of the A15, the A16, the A17, the A52, the A158, and other key routes of that, and the A57 as well, and a few other key routes. So they pick sort of the interlinking key routes through, and then you've got the areas of the transport strategies that pick up the urban areas. But of course, there are going to be, and we've acknowledged there are going to be areas that don't necessarily fall within those. It doesn't mean that they're forgotten, because that's what the local highways officers are there for. They to raise that, and local members to raise through that process. And actually, that's how those schemes are done. And we have other funding that can become available for investing in those areas if it's deemed as required. So yes, they're not in the strategies, but they're not forgotten. They do receive funding as and when required.
Councillor Dyer.
Thanks for that, Sam. Just a quick follow-up, if I may. Is there a map available? You say that obviously the Lincoln, for instance, travel strategy isn't just Lincoln. Are you able to provide a map of actually where these areas are in Lincolnshire with the routes, so we can see what's covered and what isn't?
Yeah, I've got I've got individual maps of the study areas. What I could probably do is go away and actually, if it will be helpful to this group, is pull those into one county map, so we can see that, because we haven't actually done that today. We've got them as different maps, so I can do that if that'll be helpful and provide at a later date.
Yeah, that would be most helpful, Sam. Thank you. Are there any other questions from committee members? Oh, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, you can't expect me to go through a highways meeting without mentioning Boston. But my issue really is possibly something that could relate to any new road or newish road. Now, the A16 into Boston isn't all that new now. It's sort of 30 plus years old. But there are my issue is that you have a footway on one side of the road, then after a while, the footway is on the other side of the road. There is no crossing place in between. Later on, as you get out further out into Iberton, yeah, there's an underpass with a new quadrant. There's a light control crossing. But if we want sustainable transport, then we've got to encourage residents to be walking their children to school, not taking them by car all the time. So can you please build into any plans the fact that if you choose to change the footway from one side of the road to the other, when it's a busy A road like the A16, that there is a means of crossing that is safe, not just take pot luck and hope that you can get to the bollards in the middle. You know, it's just not on with a busy A road. So I don't know if you're aware. I think the person I'm addressing now isn't visible, but you know, Sam, are you aware of this situation, please? And can it be factored into all future plans that crossing places have and footways do actually tie in with each other?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not aware of the specific thing, but if you provide some details, we can have a look at that. With regards to the future, it's probably worth stressing that when we do a project of any sort, first of all, as part of the design process, safety is considered. You know, the national design standards that we have to follow have safety as part of that. But actually, just as a catch-all as well, we have Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership do safety audits at a safety audit stage 1, 2, and 3. So stage 1 is at concept stage to provide input about, hey guys, you really need to be looking at this. This is going to be a concern. Stage 2 is when the detailed design is complete before it starts on site to look at and say, no, you've done this wrong, or you need to look at this, or this is going to cause an issue here that you haven't considered. And the stage 3 is actually post completion. You finish the product on site, and they look and go, well, okay, none of us envisaged this, but actually this isn't operating particularly well, and we're going to have to change this, or this is a concern. And in some cases, there's actually a stage 4 and a stage 5, which is 1 year after completion, and then 3 years after completion. But they're only needed for certain criteria schemes. Now, during those processes, we acknowledge those reports and we'll make changes based on them, or there will be a exception report as to why we feel they've already been considered as part of the design, and those are signed off by heads of service. So it's the reason I highlight is to say that obviously I don't know the specific thing, and we can pick that up. That's no problem. But any future schemes, there is a heavy, strong safety concern, which again is more than just that, you know, insular scheme you're doing. It's just in consideration about, okay, you've changed, for example, the footway to one side. Where are people going to cross? So it does go wider than just the specific scheme.
Councillor Austin.
May I just, I will enlighten Mr. Edwards as to where this location is. We've just got a new area highways manager, and I've discussed it with him, and the previous one was well aware of it as well. As you come out of Boston, going south on the A16, before you get to the new quadrant and the junction and the football stadium, the footway, a lot of people now are walking out of Boston along that route, because that is the direct route if you are going, say, to the stadium or to the new development. But the footway is on one side. You get to Titton Lane, which is a road that links the schools on one side of the road and the schools on the other side. And then that is where the footway out from then on is on the opposite side of the road. So if you're going to the football stadium, then you are sort of chancing your life and walking along the curb on the A16, you know, these sort of situations. And all right, this is an existing one, but I wouldn't want this, although it's a newly existing one, I wouldn't want this to be happening elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. Yeah, I will look into that particular location, and we'll come back to you when we've spoken with the area people.
Is that everything? Is that all comments from committee members? Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the actions, the committee is invited to make comments on the actions taken to date and the planned developments for the future. I think really we've covered most of this in the debate on this item. So I move that we endorse the report and request our comments as recorded to be taken into account. Does anyone disagree? Thank you, that is agreed. Moving on. So the committee work programme, this item is on pages 19 to 24 of the agenda pack. This item enables the committee to comment on the content of its work programme. The report will be presented by Chiara, the scrutiny officer. Over to you, Chiara.
Thank you, Chairman. The work programme is being reviewed, as you all know, in each meeting of the committee to ensure that its contents are still relevant and will continue to add value to the work of the Council and partners. Actions required today is that members of the committee review and approve the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration within the work programme. Moving on from that, since the publication of this agenda, on the 16th of October, query was received by Councillor Richard Cleaver in relation to a previous motion adopted by the County Council on the 17th of September, which stated that the Council agrees to refer to the Council's Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee consideration of the Council's speed limit policies in relation to the use of 20 miles per hour speed limits and how the Council can assess and appropriately support communities who want to design and put in place a 20 Years Plenty campaign and propose changes to the Council's speed limit policies accordingly. As this committee has previously heard, speeding issues are indeed a reoccurring topic at parish council meetings and local community forums and are raised directly with members and the Council as a concern by residents across the county. I would like to remind members that a review of traffic speed management in Lincolnshire was suggested to the Overview Scrutiny Management Board in September 2021 and was indeed approved for future allocation to a scrutiny panel, the schedule of which will be confirmed in due course. The review could consider what the challenges and opportunities are for effective speed management around the county. I would like to therefore open up to this committee and relevant officers for your views on whether you would like to see an interim report on speed limit policies as described previously. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any members that wish to speak? Councillor Dyer.
Thank you, Chairman. I think as it was agreed by full council, I think obviously we should have that come to committee. My only suggestion would be, because of the various items on the agendas coming up, we've got some packed agendas. So perhaps that's put to committee in perhaps April or May, where I can see there's no items on the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, anyone else? Councillor Brooks.
I was just wondering, you mentioned that we did put it forward to go to a scrutiny panel for a review. How long is it likely to be before it is put forward? I know it's been agreed that it does go to a scrutiny panel in the future, but how long is that likely to be?
I think that was towards the end of the council term. So yeah, so we wondered if the committee would rather it happen sooner.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, having had that clarification, I think something should come to this committee sooner than that. Yeah, we should have an interim report. I agree with Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, is there any other speakers? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. On future work for this committee, I request that the issue of reinstating street lighting in built-up areas is reviewed and a paper is brought to this committee. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor
On
Brooks.
that, Chairman, from Councillor Clark, I think we do get a regular report on the street lighting comes to the committee, and so I don't know how far away that is. The last one was probably nearly 2 years ago. I wasn't on the committee last year, during the last year, so there will be a report coming. I'm just not sure when, which would allow it to be considered. Is it possible to find out when that report is expected, please?
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Yes, absolutely. I can look into that, and I will look into bringing it back to the committee within this council term. Thank you very much for all your comments.
Thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion for this item. The committee is in terms of actions. We've gone through that, so I move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed in pages 19 to 24, and that the additional item highlighted in discussion today about the council speed limit policies to be programmed in the coming months, as suggested by Councillor Dyer. Does anyone disagree? Oh yeah, and street lighting, I do apologise. Yes, so is there anyone that disagrees with that? No, thank you, that is agreed. And that is the end of the meeting. Thank you everyone for your attendance. Thank you.